do we have quorum requirements? And if so, have we met them?
Tom, that's a question for you.
No, there are no quorum requirements.
Oh, great. Then let's start. Make the best use of everybody's time. I'll call the meeting to order. I'm Holly Schroeder. I'm chair of this Stakeholder Advisory Committee, and Tara Bravo with CV Strategies is going to be our facilitator once again. All right, going through the logistical things. The audio, video, and chat are being recorded in accordance with the Governor's Executive Order N2920. Everybody is unmuted, so please mute your device if you're not speaking so we can avoid feedback and background noise, and then unmute yourself to comment or respond. The chat feature, once again, is for meeting management. So it's, hey, I want to say something, or, those kinds of things, purely administrative. Members of the public are muted and their video is off on joining the meeting, but will be unmuted for public comments and questions. I will call for general public comment at item 2. Then again, for each agenda item, comments are limited to 3 minutes. Members of the public have 3 options for public comment. You may indicate in the chat feature at any time during the item discussion that you wish to be called upon. 2, you may write your question or comment in the chat feature, or when public comments open, Tara will unmute all members of the public and you may verbally state your name and indicate you have a question. The first 2 are probably more efficient. That's Holly's commentary. Kathy Martin will time the comments and will ring a bell at the 30-second mark and then say, thank you, your time is up at 3 minutes and your mic will be muted. Public comment can also be sent via email or mail. Please refer to the agenda for the specifics. Any public comments received via email or in writing after 2:30 p.m. today will be posted to the website by tomorrow, all of which will be part of the public record. As we introduce each item, I will introduce the item and the presenter. At the end of each presentation, I will ask the committee for any questions of the presenter. Please, you can use the raise hand feature on Zoom or otherwise signal verbally or visually and wait to be called upon so we don't have many people talking at once. If it appears that many have questions, I may just go in alphabetical order for simplicity. I will then ask for public comments, and the committee may then discuss the item and the public comments. Again, where we can, let's use the raise hand feature and be recognized before speaking. Today's PowerPoint and handouts are available on the website, and the PowerPoint will be shown during this meeting. And with that, Tara, I will turn it to you to take roll call. And she is still muted, so.
Unmuting.
Yeah. Each time we do this, we'll get better.
I know. All right. So Matt Carpenter.
Yes.
Steve Sly.
Present.
Roger Herring.
Here.
Dennis Ostrom. Dennis is in the list of participants, so I'm wondering if you. Dennis, are you still here? Let me try and there. I'm gonna try unmuting him and see if you.
I'm here.
Dennis. Thank you, Dennis. Great. Eric Adair.
Here.
Holly.
Here.
All right. Sandra Cattell.
I'm here.
Lacey Fortner.
Present.
Roy, is Roy here? All right. Roy's not here. Kathy Armitage.
Here.
Dan Mastaneda.
Here.
I believe that's it. Anybody else? Nope. Great.
All right, then we will consider that our welcome and introductions. Are there any general public comments? Tara, not sure which it is all of a sudden.
It's Tara. It's like the plantation and Gone with the Wind. So are there any public comments? Unmute everyone. No public comment.
Okay. Then we will move on to the general agenda items, the first of which is the approval of the minutes from May 29. We'll ask for a motion to approve.
Move.
Thank you, Roger. Is there a second? Matt, thank you. Are there any edits, changes, comments before? Kara, is it possible for me to ask for abstentions and opposition and then assume uniform so we don't have to go through everybody's vote?
I believe that to be the case, yes.
Okay, so if you can unmute everybody. Is there anybody abstaining from the minutes approval? Any opposition? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
We'll assume that is unanimous approval. All right, go back to my agenda. Okay, Tara, I'll keep it to you for item 3.2. Or is that in my notes? Maybe it's in my notes. Yeah, Tara, you're going to do this presentation, so or start that off. So I will hand it back to you.
Fantastic. There are documents that we posted online. I will also show those here, but we're going to start with the actual PowerPoint. The other documents are merely backup to this report. So let's talk about our statistics very quickly. Meeting at a glance, we actually had 68 total participants, which is very exciting for a hydrogeological conceptual model workshop. That's very exciting. We had a total number of questions and feedback that included 19 during the meeting. And then after the meeting, we had an additional 2 feedback forms that were submitted through the online feedback option. That online feedback form will remain up and live along with that resource center for the remainder of this process. So as I continue to get any feedback forms, I will continue to report on those forms. I've also included those forms in your packet that you can pull from online. So the actual forms themselves with no edits whatsoever are available as part of this report. And we'll show them at the end. All right, next, there. So presentation feedback, I just want to kind of quickly go over. There were a lot of positives and some things that we could improve upon. So great presentation. I've read a lot of the old reports, fabulous summary, super awesome, great. One person said they didn't understand the model being used to measure groundwater inflow and outflow. So please explain that in more basic terms and more clearly next time. So we've got an opportunity to increase the amount of explanation surrounding the model for groundwater. I think we're doing a good job. I like the presentation. I hope some clarity and priorities based on this data emerge as we go along. So just something to keep in mind. And finally, I got the feedback from 2 different people that Dan responding to questions as they are asked in lieu of waiting for the hydrologist to get the Q&A portion of the presentation was a negative experience for them, but it might be positive for others. So we'll have to kind of address that and as a group and decide what we would like to see going forward. So with that presentation feedback, I'd like to open up discussion on this portion of the presentation. So this is all the presentation specific feedback. Next, we'll get into general plan feedback. So can we address is there anything that we'd like to address in the presentation feedback and then moving forward on how we'd like to see things change? If there's any feedback from you guys on the presentation.
This is Sandra. I have a couple of comments. The first one is I had asked a question about the relationship between the aquifers and oil drilling. And there is,
Right.
hello?
Right, I said right. And we do have questions and frequently asked questions later on where we do get to that question very specifically.
Okay, well, I will bring it up later. I have a
This
question.
is general presentation feedback that we're at right now.
Okay. Well, I would agree. It was a very well-run presentation. And it seemed very accessible.
Fantastic. How do we want to how does the committee feel about the responding to questions quickly? Do we want to continue that? Do we not want that with in regard to Dan responding to questions? Since he does have the background that is required for some of those questions, and I know he's trying to help and act as a committee member, so I need you guys to figure out how you want as a group.
Employers and workers in healthcare and food supply chain that have been at risk.
I can't, is somebody talking? I
Whoever's
can't hear
speaking,
them.
yeah, it's jumbled.
Chair, this is Eric. If I can jump in, I'm actually confused by this last bullet. I thought there was positive feedback in the comments as we went along when people like Dan offered responses to questions that were posed. Is that, and you call it a negative, was that in fact?
No, I received separate, I'm not including those comments because they were from personal individuals. I received privately 2 messages from 2 different individuals that did not appreciate that Dan was answering instead of the hydrologist. So I have 2 people who were not pleased, but I had a lot of people who were very happy, clearly, as you've stated, that were happy with the responses being quick. So it's up to the committee on how you guys, did you find it helpful? Did you appreciate that? Would you rather the hydrologist answer in the Q&A portion? So I'm happy to address that more specifically. I'm sorry I was not clear, but there were 2 very specific individuals who made negative statements privately to me.
Well,
I guess what I liked about it was I liked the real-timeness of it, in that sometimes people had a quick question and it would interrupt the person who was speaking to answer it, and then I'd have impeded comprehension if you didn't get that quick answer. So I would say, I mean, I would think any of us as committee members could chime in if we had that information. But I would also like, and maybe this is something that can be arranged, is if somebody on the consulting team, you know, the hydrologist, the expert, is also, you know, watching that to do more real-time feedback, making sure that there's a clarification if something is said in, you know, shorthand or said in a way that's not as clear. But I think the real-time response there to kind of keep things moving along was very helpful.
You know, Holly, I agree with you. However, 2 things. Number one, it didn't give the person asking the question, you know, I felt in one of my questions I didn't get a chance to come back to it.
Okay.
And have it discussed by the hydrologist. But the other thing is if you were on the phone, you had no clue about those questions. And that's why they should be read, and I believe they should be read so that questions and answers are accessible to everyone.
So Tara, maybe we could, if we could have somebody, you know, on the team watching that and doing that sort of real time, but then when we get to Q&A, we could go back and say, the question was X, this was the response in the chat, did that answer your question? And hopefully, you know, 90% of the time it's a quick yes, and we move on.
And in fact, we did do that very specifically. We read every single question. I included a description of Dan's response and then turned it to the hydrologist to ask if that was correct, if they had anything to add on it. And then several examples they did add to it. or clarify it, or say in some way that, yes, while we're talking about that, it is accurate, but with this caveat. So we did in fact do that.
Okay. And I think Sandra's going to bring up something about her question when we get to the more specific things, which perhaps what this pertains to. Just guessing, Sandra.
Yes.
So I think if we do that, and I guess I would think, any of us some of us are more expert on different topics than others, obviously, but that as a committee member, is there a reason we shouldn't feel free to respond and get that information in there so that people, or is there any reason not to?
That's for the committee to decide.
Okay. I don't see a reason for us not to bring our own experiences and knowledge into that. Dan obviously has a tremendous amount of professional experience. The rest of us have different types of professional experience and personal experience relating. I don't see why we wouldn't want to use that to enrich the conversation whenever we can.
And I think Kathy has something to add.
Well, my question was about something different, but my input for this is I think that if people are coming to this conversation, when I say people, meaning the public, are coming into this conversation at the workshops to hear from the professionals who are presenting this information, I think the questions should be answered by the professional staff that is presenting the information, and not necessarily the committee members. But I have questions about the survey. Do I ask those now, or is that going to be later in your presentation, Tara?
That is later. We get into the survey responses and we get into the specific questions that were asked later in this presentation.
And I'll reserve my questions for that time. Thank you.
Perfect.
Other thoughts on committee members putting their answers or thoughts in? I agree, Kathy, and I think that's why if we are circling back at the end to make sure that everything is asked and the experts, the hydrogeologists or engineers or whoever it is, are responding and either confirming an answer or expanding on an answer, I think that is absolutely important. We certainly don't want any erroneous information that we might have, a committee member might have to be in that. But I think and maybe Tara, to the extent it's possible, if somebody on the staffing team can be monitoring that to do that fast response, then it sort of alleviates this question. But again, I felt that it kept things moving, and I think it helped people's comprehension along the way. And that was helpful. But if that can be done by staff rather than the committee, I think that's fine. I just don't want the committee to feel like they can't comment and they can't be involved in that and giving some perspective as well, because I think that enriches the whole conversation. But I think we should always come back to the staff at the end.
I have one question along these lines. I agree with Holly, your comments. I don't recall what we said at the beginning of that meeting. Are the public participants, are they even aware that there's a dozen or so of us on this committee who bring some form of expertise and may want to give input? I mean, if we were having these meetings in a normal setting in person, presumably we would be standing there interacting with people, not standing off to the side quietly. And in the virtual sense, we're sort of doing the same thing by weighing in with comments. So do the public participants even know that we exist, or are we just more faces in the Zoom meeting?
So that's a great question. We did not make a specific announcement of the Stakeholder Advisory Committee, but I think it's a great addition, and I'm happy to include that in the next public workshop.
The other thing that, it takes a little bit of effort, Taylor, we might do, and you could maybe walk people through it, is like when I came in, it had my company name and I changed my name to say Holly, is we could have people change it and say committee member, just you know, that way everybody's labeled. You could even have people who are members. I know there were several members of the groundwater agency on there, and you could have them label it that way. So it's very transparent if you have a formal role in this process, either as an advisory committee member or as a elected member.
And I can actually change the names, Holly. So if
So it's even easier.
yeah, so if that's something the committee would like to see, I can, and that's the direction by the committee. I'm happy to change names if we need to, or you guys can change your own names, however you'd prefer to have that happen.
I just did it. It took about a
Eric
second.
just did it. Eric is on it.
Got it.
I think that's a really good idea.
Okay. Other comments on sort of this general presentation feedback? Otherwise, I'll have Tara move on to the next slide.
Do we have clarity on the Dan piece?
I think I think I would say first preference would be somebody on staff is responding quickly. Second is advisory committee members, especially if we're labeled, should be able to still weigh in, but we should at every point, as you did, circle back with those questions, confirm a response from the speakers to make sure that if it was answered in the chat, it was sufficiently answered and they didn't need to expound upon it. So sort of 3 parts.
And this is Dan. I'll temper my input, but I thought the chat was just that, and you know, questions were being asked, and I was providing my input. In 1 or 2 instances, I said, you know, to be confirmed by staff, because I don't intend to speak on behalf or to contradict anything they have to say. So, but I'll temper that in the future. The one thing that I would like to see, like in the future programs, is I didn't realize that at the public meeting, if you will, there were 68 total participants. I had no idea how many members of the public were listening in, and it'd be great to have that sense at the beginning of the meeting, you know, what the level of participation is. So just a suggestion. I don't know if that's possible or not, but that would be great if we could do that. I don't need to know names. I just, you know, want to know if we've got a packed audience or if it's, you know, a couple of 3 people.
And Holly, I just wanted to echo before we move on that I also thought that the presentation was done very well. And I was very happy to see, because I felt like it was very techy when it was previewed to us at the meeting before. And I was very happy to see that it was broken down into language and material that was understandable for people who don't work with this type of data every day. So I really appreciated that and want to say thank you to the staff and those of you who did the presentation and put it together. So thank you.
Great. Great.
And I want to thank the committee, because that's the direct reflection of your feedback. So that's exactly what the committee is for, and that's why we meet ahead of time to make sure we go through all of this stuff. So moving on to general plan feedback. So this is, and I'm going to talk very specifically about how this information will be used, but I want to talk about what the feedback was first, just as a report, and then I've got another slide after this to address that information. So general plan feedback is by ensuring outputs don't exceed inputs, so groundwaters don't decrease, we can avoid subsidence, and the ecology of our area and other areas down the watershed from us are not affected. I would also like to see more monitoring stations for subsidence. 2 don't seem to be enough for such a large valley. I hope we continue to have sustainable groundwater if the state keeps cutting back on statewide supplies. Locally, I value the ability to have green areas along rivers and trees in our community, so it's a nice place to live. The presenter is saying there's no agricultural irrigation from the Saugus, and Golden Oak Ranch is clearly drawing from the Saugus. So this is general plan feedback. This is what I wanted to get to. So general statements such as, I hope we continue to have sustainable groundwater if the states keep cutting back. Locally, I value the ability to have green areas along rivers and trees. Those will be taken into consideration by both you, I hope, and the SCV GSA Board of Directors, which I will report to them this feedback to make educated recommendations and decisions regarding the plan. So as you look forward, as we get into other pieces, you'll have this information, you'll have direction from the public, you'll know what they're thinking, what they're feeling, and you'll be able to make better decisions on recommendations. The board will be able to decide whether or not they want to go forward with this or that section of the plan based on this feedback, and it will be included in your thought process and their thought process. If there are specific corrections, however, they will be addressed directly. So for example, the presenter saying there's no agricultural irrigation, that's a very clear statement from the Saugus, and the Golden Oak Ranch is clearly drawing from the Saugus. So that needs to be corrected and or addressed. So that will be addressed or corrected directly. So by the time we meet next time, you'll have a response to this particular change because it's a specific change to the plan. Are there any questions about how feedback works or how we intend to incorporate it into the plan?
I have one comment. This is Dan.
Mm-hmm.
Regarding the subsidence, and actually there's a lot of physical evidence as to whether subsidence is occurring or not. When you look at buildings and bridges and cracking, if that's happening or not, but that's physical evidence. But for that one specifically, I think that's a question that the consultant should address. I know it was an opinion that was expressed, but 2 monitoring stations may or may not be sufficient. But again, I'd like the experts to provide the input on that particular.
Absolutely, and we'll circle back to this, but this is the exact kind of thing where it allows us to know that that feeling is out there, and then we can address it. And like I said, if there's a correction, we'll make the correction. If it's something that needs to be addressed, we'll address it. And then for the general stuff, we'll just make sure that we are taking that into consideration as we make decisions. Are there any additional questions? Should I look for people who's raised their hands? No? Okay.
Wait, I have a question. So how does this translate into the GSP document?
That's what I was trying to get at. So right now we have technical memos, some things that are specifically addressed, like the agricultural irrigation. That 4th bullet point is specifically addressed in that technical memo. Obviously, it either needs to be changed or we need to address it in some other fashion, but it needs to be addressed directly. So we will have the consultants come back and say, this is how we are addressing that point. If there's something that's general that has been included in the record, and we'll make sure that you guys have access to this. Obviously it's online, but at each point, we'll make sure that you have an updated report with all of the feedback, so that when you're making decisions and you're making recommendations on whether or not this piece of the plan makes sense, you'll have that feedback that you've got.
Tara, I have a question.
Yeah, absolutely.
Roger, and is this an appropriate place, or did I miss the opportunity, or can I have the opportunity to talk about the reduced flow from Bouquet Reservoir, which reduces the inflow to the Saugus Aquifer, to make sure that's an issue that's addressed in the coming meetings?
Yeah, so it's part of the general plan feedback. I think it should be we should add that in here. I'd love to see a very specific line that you sent to me, but additionally that would happen at the end of the meeting where we talk about agenda items for upcoming meetings.
Okay, it's an issue that I think fits into this feedback, and I just want to make sure that somewhere along the line the advisory committee and the board considers this issue.
Absolutely, and I would like to include some description or something into the general plan feedback, but also to go back to your idea of having the presentation part of it, it would need to be addressed in upcoming action items, and that would be with Holly at the end of the whole event where we talk about what we're going to discuss at the next meeting.
Well, and,
that's fine.
And I'm not sure, Roger, is it the same as the DWP water rights application, or is this related
Yes,
but not
it's
the
the
same?
It's that.
No, it's related to and ties into that.
So we'll get to it at the end of the meeting then, but I think we've already put that on the July agenda, so maybe we just need to expand that.
Yeah.
Okay, so
that's fine.
sorry. Previewing the end of the meeting, sorry.
That's okay.
All right, so moving on to frequently asked questions, question mark. So I have a question mark here because what I wanted to do was re-go over every question that was asked, and not necessarily that we're going to answer them in this forum. We've already answered them once, but we'd like to figure out which ones you guys feel like need to be on the website. You want to make sure have a well-formulated answer that we post in addition to the question. If you'd like us to reword the question, or if you want to make sure that we definitely do not reword the question, I want to make sure that I include very specifically committee feedback in this portion, so that, for example, why is there so much chlorine in our water? Is that really an SCV GSA question? Should we include that here? Or do we need to maybe like that is a water quality issue that doesn't have to do with this particular thing, so we don't include it in our frequently asked questions? Or do you want every single question that's ever been asked? So that needs to be a decision that the committee makes in terms of what remains. And obviously we have the video with all the Q&A online, so we're not removing that from record. It's just whether or not we want to include that in an FAQ section on the website.
Again, this is Dan. The issue of chlorine in the water has nothing to do with the Sustainability Act. It's a treatment issue. And I think staff actually referred Stacy, or whoever was communicating to Stacy, to the appropriate technical person at the agency to address that question or to get that answer. So it's being handled, but handling it through the GSA doesn't do anybody any good. Once again, it has nothing to do with groundwater sustainability.
Tara, for some of these, I mean, I don't have the website up, but is there a way on the website to say other water knowledge resources, and that could link to the water agency at the local level, maybe some state links? I mean, just like something like that. This has to do with, as Dan says, water quality and water treatment. It's, linked to, some things could link to the sanitation district, just to sort of, if people are asking about it and they're hearing about this process, it might trigger them to have this question, but we got to put them to where they're going to get an answer, and it's not through this process necessarily. And so I wonder if we could just have a little, like another little other resources section on the website that could link out to the other relevant agencies and their information.
Absolutely, we can include that, and I'm happy to do so. I think that's a great idea. I do want to go through these questions though one at a time, just to make sure that I don't miss or skip or diminish anyone's opinion or thoughts. I know this can be a very sensitive subject, so I wanted to make sure that we were as inclusive as possible, but still useful. I don't want this to just become a huge list of everything that anyone's ever asked, potentially, unless that's what we want. So I'm just trying to be strategic and thoughtful with how we execute.
Yep.
So what does Sunshine Ranch member mean? Do we think that that's a frequently asked question, or no? And this is probably the bulk of our presentation right here.
Well, it's a geologic formation. My recollection is it's not water bearing, but Slade or Scalamanini's people could easily answer that. It's a geology question.
And I'm not expecting us to have answers for these. Like, we're not going to discuss the answers right now. This is just whether or not we want the question to be included on the website. And we'll put together, I'll pull from the transcript, polish it a little bit so they're a little bit shorter, because I know some of them kind of wandered back on themselves. As you're talking, you tend to do that. So we'll make sure that these are polished answers and make sense and all of that, and are super clear and speak to the language that has been useful in the past. So I'm not looking for like what the answer is, more just like, do we, or who even should answer the question. These will all be answered by geologists and experts, and then polished by a communications firm. 100%.
This is Roger, and I would like to see the question included because I think a lot of people want to know, including myself, why is it called Sunset Ranch or Sunshine Ranch?
Yeah, and this is Dan, just going through them real quick. The relationship between the aquifers and oil deposits, that could be appropriately addressed.
We're going to go through each question, Dan.
Yeah.
Uh,
So Sunshine Member Ranch is a yes so far? Okay.
And I think the other question,
Yeah.
Tara, that maybe as you guys go through this is there some of these are very specific, and is there a general question that's really your FAQ that this is a sub-question to?
And we're happy to do that as well if you're fine with us revising the questions. I don't want to take anybody's words out of context, so I want to make sure that that's thought about. But I do agree that, like, what does Sunshine Ranch member mean? People may not even understand that question, but they want to know more about Sunshine Ranch. What is Sunshine Ranch? How does it relate to this process? Might be a better question. And then you can get into what a member is, where it's located, answer all of those questions in connection to it.
Yeah, I think you asked that sort of, yeah, I think that's, and this could be like a specific sub question, but maybe there's a broader contextual question for some of these and that one. But I think we ought to try to, you know, and maybe there's even I don't want to go overkill here, but have a general question, then you can have, you know, what does Sunshine Ranch member mean? You could say, you know, asked at June, whatever the date was, stakeholder meeting, just so that people know it was specifically asked. That's just a thought. I don't know if that might get cumbersome, but just toss it out there for you guys to think about.
That works for me.
So I just have a quick comment.
Yeah.
The person that asked me why there was so much chlorine in our water isn't someone who is typically, I guess, oh, it's the word I'm looking for. They're not typically interested in water. And so when I was invited,
I think we lost you.
We lost your sound, Stacy.
Stacy, we lost your. All right, let's try.
I'm trying to wave her down.
I just beat you. I just beat you, Holly. I just sent it privately to Stacy.
I don't think she's seeing the chat though.
Nope, it's not gonna happen.
Think of how to.
But it seems like a really interesting perspective.
I want to know what she's gonna say, but she's gonna be so sad that she missed all this.
Yeah.
She's gonna realize.
Oh, that's genius. Go, Kathy.
All right.
She's still not looking. Maybe if I stop screen sharing, I'm gonna stop screen sharing for a minute. Now, Kathy, try your thing.
No, she's into it.
Okay.
Excuse me, this is Sandra. I got kicked
Yes.
off and my computer is just on the fritz.
Oh.
Okay.
I have no
Okay.
idea.
Thank you for letting me know. I'm gonna rename you so that we know that's
Okay.
Sandra.
But I do have a comment on my, and of course it went out just as the point I was hoping to be able to make a comment.
Anybody hear me?
Of course.
I'm not muted.
Oh,
Now you can.
We're-
Now we can barely
Yay, we
hear
can
you,
hear you.
Stacy. But we lost you for a lot of that. Test
Okay,
it again,
can-
Stacy.
Okay, can you hear me or
Yeah,
no?
Now we
Because
can.
I'm not muted.
yay!
Oh, we
Okay,
were
I don't
trying
know
to
what-
get attention.
Yeah, I wasn't muted. I didn't have, it wasn't
No.
anything on my end. I have no
No,
idea.
no, it just all of a sudden went dead. Anyway,
So,
you
so my whole
recap?
thing was,
So
yeah,
eloquent,
just
I'm
recap
sure,
it.
but can you recap?
Yeah, sure. So what I was saying was that people that are typically aren't interested in water are asking questions about water. And so I just didn't think that we should be excluding those questions. And maybe it,
It's something with your microphone, Stacy.
can you hear me?
Now we can.
Yeah.
Your microphone is
What
cutting
the
in and out.
hell is going on?
So let me try to read your mind a minute. I think what you're
Yeah.
saying is somebody, you know, it's not a normally engaged water person and they're asking questions. We don't want to ignore them.
Well, the whole point is to get
Right.
public interest into what we're doing. And
So-
you know, questions are questions and they should be asked and allowed and, you know, whatever. But maybe it's not frequent, but it should be notated somewhere that these questions were asked.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, that's why I was suggesting to Tara, maybe we have a, you know, other related resources somewhere so that they can get pointed to information on chlorine, they can get pointed to information on, you know, water treatment and other things on the website.
And just for the record, for Dan, I did refer her to the agency. That was something that was a direct referral to customer service at the agency. So I did do that when I was talking to her. So that already had happened even before you made your suggestion.
I think what we're trying to figure out and the guidance that Tara is looking for from us is, I mean, if these, how do we balance every question with frequently asked questions? And maybe we just have frequently asked and then we have other questions and we tell staff to answer every single question and put it on the website. I just think there could be some ways of, you know, putting these in context of, you know, something. And so there really is more like a frequently asked question that different people would ask in slightly different ways, but it gets to the main question or the main essence that they're looking for, simply so that you don't have 5 pages of frequently asked questions, in which case it's no longer useful to somebody to read.
Right, and with one workshop, I don't think we have frequent yet, but.
Well, we don't yet, but we can, I guess I'm trying to see, can we devise some frequent out of this?
I'm agreeing with you.
Because if we do this every workshop, we're going to end up with 5 pages.
Yeah,
so,
I'm agreeing with you, Holly. Thanks.
Sandra, I think you were trying to come in and say something. Are you back on?
I am. I'm not back on the Zoom, but I am on the phone. So I had wanted to address the relationship between the aquifers and oil drilling, because there is a relationship. And it was stated that there is no relationship, first of all. It's a relationship of depth for how far underneath the aquifer is the oil. And there's a question about the oil drilling's effect on the stability of the bedrock and consequently the aquifers. And both the extraction and the injection wells actually do cross the aquifers. And there is an issue of subsidence, either subsidence within the oil drilling area and or maybe causing or exacerbating subsidence within the aquifer itself. And they've had some interesting studies done on the oil wells that are just south of Culver City. And it's actually caused a lot of mini earthquakes out there. And they are starting to investigate the possibility of subsidence in that area. So I am just wondering, you know, if at some point something like this could be addressed. It would have been nice to have the hydrogeologist who would hopefully know the connection between the two out here to have been able to answer that.
The hydrogeologist did have an opportunity to answer that, and he also said there was no connection. And I'm not going to speak for his whatever he wanted to say, but he did have a chance to answer that question and did do so. And it's all if you want to watch the recording again, that's also online, where he does answer the question.
But I do believe that it was viewed as you know, are they in the same plane or whatever? Not in terms of the effect that oil drilling has on the geology underneath the aquifers. I don't think that it was addressed in that term.
And that may be something we can specifically tie in and like ask a slight, again, this could be a situation where we ask a slightly different question, and that could be something that we put online so that it is not just the relationship of the aquifer and oil deposit, but more about the relationship between oil drilling and the geology of the region.
Yes. Yes, I guess I worded it poorly, and I will take credit for not doing a very good job on that. But I know that there is a connection, and I was just wondering how severe the connection was out here. I do hope at some point in the future when we talk about our water quality that we do also address the oil drilling and the possibility of leakage.
Well, this is Dan. While I could answer that question, I won't. But Slade is a good resource. And if you look at the big oil production that's occurred in the valley, it's been on the west side. There hasn't been any subsidence due to oil production. And the relationship, as I define it, from there is aquifers and the oil deposits. The issue, the one issue that is a relevant one, has to do with ensuring that oil, both producing wells and abandoned wells, don't result in communication, to use a technical term, from the oil reservoir or reservoirs into the aquifers. But anyway, but the thing is, we would know it if it was happening because of testing of our groundwater. But in any, Slade is a good resource for that, or Slade's office would be a good resource to address any and all questions relating to any communication or whatever between the water aquifers and the oil reservoirs.
Thank you, Dan. That's getting close to where I was, you know, my question was leading, and I appreciate your addressing it.
But Tara, this little exchange on questions that Sandra has, I think one of the things when we answer these questions that it strikes me as is we want to, I think we want, and I'll ask the committee if they agree with this, we want these frequently asked questions to be as much about the technical background data, and because it's in the plan we prepare, the recommendations we prepare, but about what are we doing about that. And so I want to make sure we don't go into speculation or, you know, because this, then that, because I think that's the committee and ultimately the agency's decision is to make those policy choices. I don't know if I'm being clear on what I'm trying to say here, but, you know, I just feel like we want to not have conjecture, not have supposition about what might be. And here it's like, well, we know this because of monitoring, we know that because of where the wells are, et cetera, which is fact-based. And because of what we find, we think we should do these things, which is, I think, more about our recommendations of the plan to the agency. Is that?
Yeah, thank you. That's a great point. But I do think that a clarification on the communication between the oil drilling, the geology is an important question to be asked, and we'll sort of revise the question to ensure that it encapsulates kind of the spirit behind this question rather than the question itself.
Thank you.
If that's okay with you.
And I might even say that there was something in the presentation where we saw the graphic about why we know a lot about our groundwater. It's because we have other wells. There might be something about that that's relevant here, just because it does help that because we have these oil wells, it has given us data, if I recall the presentation correctly. Was somebody else trying to ask a question? Sorry, I didn't mean to cut somebody off. Okay, Tara, why don't you keep it
anyone? Okay, why does the State Water Resource Control Board differentiate groundwater and alluvial water? Here they are called one and the same. And he did, yeah, go ahead.
I'm sorry, go ahead, Tara, because, well, I'll explain.
I felt like the hydrologist had a great answer for this and really explained it well. And I think it is something that's a little confusing because it's the legal versus the physical. And I thought that was a really great moment where you can highlight the fact that there are legal definitions of things and other definitions. You know, like I thought that was good.
Okay.
What I was going to add is the question as worded, you almost have to correct the question in order to answer it, because groundwater and alluvial water, or water from the alluvium, is groundwater. It's groundwater from the alluvium. The State Water Resources Control Board does groundwater that's under the influence of surface water, but that's a very technical issue. I don't think we're there yet. If you want to leave the question or have an answer that has some relevance, probably have to ask the consultants to revise the question where it makes a little bit more sense, because once again, there is no differentiation between groundwater and alluvial water.
The question that was answered was the difference between surface water and groundwater by the state board. That's what, so if, I agree with you, Dan, that the question should be rephrased.
So perfect, we'll rephrase that. But I felt like that was a good question that people were confused about and allows us the conversation of legal versus physical. Okay, does slower groundwater movement in the Saugus Aquifer mean slower recharge rate? Is that do you think that's a frequently asked question, or do we want to, what do we think?
Once again, and that's one of the ones I answered during the chat. The answer is yes. There's no more to it than that. Yeah, it's a simple one to answer, put it that way. The alluvial
might not make it frequent.
Yeah.
Are we going through these questions because we're going to take some out? Because I think they all stay. We just maybe don't call it frequently asked questions. Maybe we just change the name of it, but we keep all the questions. You know, instead of frequently asked, why can't we just say these were questions asked at this workshop with this date?
I'm agreeing with that. I think I have confusion over where this is supposed to be housed on the website. And does it need to be a central FAQ section, or like Stacy's mentioning, can we just have, these were the questions from this workshop and these are the answers, and just leave it at that?
Yeah, because we could spend 2 hours going through every question. Does it stay? Does it go? They all, in my opinion, should all stay. We just change what we're calling them.
Tara?
So here's I'm gonna just let you know that, so if you want, we can rewrite and work with the other consultants and rewrite everything, write it all down. It's going to take some time to do, for us to do, which means it will cost the agency more to rewrite the answers to all of these questions if we just go with that kind of thing. Or right now we have a transcript where
you took it 2.5 hours.
It's very, we have the transcript from the meeting. It's on the website right now. Right now, all of these questions are available for people to listen to and watch, and as they stand.
He's awake.
But if we think that there are questions that we need to pull out, raise up, rewrite, make sure that they are more thorough, have more of an answer to them, then we call it, like, for example, the oil deposits and aquifers. In the call, like as that was asked, the answer is no. Does that answer Sandra's issue of how those two things really engage? Does that lead to the best quality communication with the public? Or do we just want to ensure that there's an accurate record? That's what this discussion is about. It's about what is, you know, like the chlorine issue. It's a great question. It's already recorded. It's on the site. I'm not asking about removing anything from the site. What I'm asking about is, are there things here that we want to lift up, make sure that there's a complete response for, and ensure that more people understand beyond just what does Sunshine Ranch member mean, but how does it connect with the groundwater? Do we want to broaden that question? Do we want to make that something that more people are aware of? So it's more than just a record issue. The record is handled.
Right.
This is also online right now.
One thing I've also suggested to staff is note the question refers to the Saugus Aquifer. I suggested they be consistent and refer to it as a Saugus Formation because that's truly the name of it, so as to make sure there's no confusion.
So it's a bigger question I'm asking than just, and we had talked about we wanted to do some FAQs originally, but the bigger question I asked at the beginning was, are there things we want to pull out as FAQs or questions or whatever we want to call them? Are there things that we want to pull out? And to which we said kind of yes. And then, but if we're just going to say, these are the questions and then have a record of every question, then, or do you want us to go through and make sure that every question is as broad as it can be, and then make sure that we answer every question comprehensively in a way that's online and like written out and typed out? So those are questions that you guys will need to answer.
Tara, I would appreciate if my question with its original answer was then we would add in some of the other issues that were brought up about, you know, the relationship between oil and water and how it's monitored. I think that would give it a much more complete, rounded out answer. That, you know, it's good to know that things like that are getting monitored.
Yeah, I think that it's part of what we can do as a committee is try to distill the questions and our experience in the workshop into what do we think were sort of key areas of comment and question. Because as Tara says, this is in the record. We're not omitting anything or we're removing anything, but that's why I was saying at the beginning, I think in some ways sort of contextualizing these questions. Certainly the one that Sandra just said, which is more of a general question about the relationship between oil and the water. I think the next question, which again gets asked as like a legal by the Water Quality, you know, Resource Board, as opposed to relationship between surface water and groundwater. And I think a lot of these things, because staff did a good job in making the presentation more accessible, as we commented in the overall, you know, intro, I think we have that. We just need to, it's like putting it in a slightly different form, in a slightly different context. So to me, the question about oil and aquifers, the question about surface water to groundwater, I think that some of the questions there about infiltration and percolation, those might be, you know, there might be a couple questions there that are all kind of getting at a similar concept. You know, that to me, that's what frequently asked questions become. And it's us using our experience and our knowledge and what we saw in the workshop to try to make it so that people can get the information in a very accessible way. Not have to necessarily go through the entire video if they don't want to find a question, but they can just sort of like, or if they don't understand something, they can go somewhere, try to get an answer, and then go back to a technical document or back to something else. That I think is why we originally said we wanted to have a FAQ section of the website.
So Holly, this is Matt. I think what you're saying is, would it be helpful to have the consultant team kind of decipher some of these questions and try and create FAQs from the questions based on how they interpret them, rather than taking them, you know, at face value. Because some of them are super specific, and then the other ones, they could start to get cobbled together and answer some larger questions that the public probably wants. You know, it's like Sandra's question. There's probably a lot you could say about that. That's a good one. Subsidence is another one. And then, you know, I guess there was stuff about percolation, and then water quality concerns, and just try to create a list of general questions that pick up these other more specific ones in their answers.
Right, so like, this is Kathy. So like, we're putting in categories, right? Creating categories of the questions. I think we're struggling with this today because we've only had one public workshop. So I don't know that today's the right day to necessarily have this discussion. I mean, do we want to maybe push this off until maybe after at least the second one to see how the categories are forming and start putting them into the categories?
That just means that I won't do anything with these until the next meeting, which if you guys are fine with that, I'm fine with that.
A question or clarification. Is that our job? Or
No,
do we rely on
I'd
the
be happy
consultant team to help us out with that?
What I need is the direction to either alter things to make them make more sense, put together. Like our team is ready and willing and able to take these questions, make sure that they make sense, ensure that the ones that we think are the most important are used, and the ones that are too specific or don't necessarily reflect what the GSA is supposed to be doing are not. But if we do that, then, and there's something that, you know, one of you feel like is 100% missing, you obviously can make that change and ask us to do that. But what I don't want to get into, and what I'm hoping and trying to stay away from, is making any predetermined judgments about what we're presenting from the public. Because what you're supposed to be helping us do is figure out how information from the public is going to be curated. So if you want us to curate it, we're happy to do that, but I don't want you guys to feel like we're taking a decision away from you.
Yeah, I think it would really be helpful to refine the questions, modify them so that, once again, so that they're more, well, I think modifying the questions would be very helpful.
Well, let me try this, and Tara. Maybe it's let's try to find themes. So like Matt just rattled off a couple. You know, something around you know, obviously, you know, relationship with oil drilling, subsidence. I think there's some stuff around monitoring, maybe some stuff around infiltration. And then, you know, we could have a general question, and then, you know, general answer, sorry. And then it could also just list as a quick bullets, small, you know, that could say at the June, whatever date it was, 17th workshop, these specific questions were asked. They are in the video. Go to video, you know, click to video. You know, that way we draw the connection, which I think is what Kathy is getting at. But we also, as we said, some of these questions are uber specific. Nobody else is going to ask that question again. So it's not frequently, it's not going to necessarily answer some related questions that a different person might have. And we want to make sure that we're sort of answering a whole lot of questions if we can, but then we can draw the dot to, you know, this is where that came from. Is that doable, Tara?
Absolutely.
Does that sound like kind of meets both needs? And then I think, Kathy, your point, we revisit those sort of broad questions and the answers, and maybe they get modified again after the next workshop. Mm-hmm. And we say, oh, well, now we have these additional questions about infiltration. Let's broaden that question or broaden that answer and add the specific questions that came up in workshop number 2.
Or do they have to, does it have to be a generalized answer? Can it just be like, again, we have the themes or categories, whatever we want to call them, And you just list those questions under that theme or category with a specific answer to that question. And maybe if people are actually paying attention to that ahead of time, before they come into the other public workshops, I don't know, maybe it'll inform them a little more. But if they're asking the same questions over and over, then they're already in the FAQs. But so I don't know, it seems to me like maybe the staff can come up with the categories or themes for us to consider for next time, and then we can start throwing the questions in. I would advocate for not changing the language of the questions. I think we should leave the questions exactly the way that they're asked by the public. And if maybe we're having a hard time interpreting them, we can, whoever's answering the question can say, this is our interpretation of the question, and then answer it the way that they were interpreting it. But I don't think we should change the wording of the public.
Well, that's why I was suggesting that maybe we do both. We have like a broad question that we answer, and then we also list the specific question that was answered, because those were answered in the workshop. You could click them to the video. Like this question about, you know, is the increase in groundwater in 92 due to the 100-year storm? Right? That's a super narrow question. Mm-hmm. I think the broader question is, what's the relationship between rainfall and amount and replenishment of the aquifer? And so, and that is like a more general, frequent kind of question. How do these things relate to each other? I think we explained some of that on the base websites, but I think also putting it into words is helpful. But then we could have a thing that says specifically at the June workshop, this was asked. And again, it is answered in the video.
Now, Holly, for that particular one, for example, you know, I think modifying the questions would be helpful. Like, for example, that State Water Resources Control Board one doesn't make any sense. If we don't modify it, how do we answer it in a succinct manner? But for example, going to the increase in groundwater during the 1992 period, you know, if the question mark was there, you know, what's the increase in groundwater in 1992 due to? That's a little bit more relevant because it was the end of the 1987 through 92 drought, and there was greater precipitation there because the drought had ended. Mm-hmm. So that would be helpful for the public. I mean, trying to keep the questions unaltered, I think does them a disservice. And maybe the combination like you described, it covers both ends. It covers both aspects.
Right, because again, these specific questions have been asked and answered in the workshop, I think, but I think it's, sometimes the questions aren't asked well, sometimes they're asked so specifically because the person has whatever background knowledge. I think if we just make it a little more general so that we can answer what we think they're getting at, the point that the question is getting towards, and then we specifically keep the actual question there with a link to the video of the workshop where the question was asked.
Okay, I think that's fine.
You have facts and facts. The first are frequently asked questions, and then next to it are the facts, which are the answers, which expound upon the question if possible. Does that make sense?
Yes.
I think so.
Or maybe an enhanced answer.
Okay. All right, Tara, is that clear?
That is the direction I need. And now we don't have to go through these. Fantastic. But that is exactly what I was trying to get us to a place where we came to a consensus on how to address questions. Because I don't want them to get lost, and yet I don't want them to become overwhelming. And I want them to be answered in the most holistic, complete way possible. So thank you very much. And that was the entirety of all of the feedback that we've received so far. So the feedback report is now complete. Are there any additional questions about feedback? And is there any additional feedback you would like to provide?
One more thing. Question relating to the amount of available water in the Saugus. And I had commented on that. And then the consultant said, I'm trying to remember, but they said there wasn't maybe the question wasn't phrased right or whatever, but just for the committee's information, back in 1972, USGS prepared a report, a study on the Saugus Formation. In that report, they concluded that there was 6 million acre feet of water in the Saugus, but they also concluded, because at the deeper depths, as the consultants mentioned, the water is salty, it's effectively not drinkable unless you desalinated it. But in that report, it said that there was 1.6 million acre feet of water in storage. So Tara, if you could run that by the consultants, because again, they didn't come up with a specific number, and I know there's a number floating out there, and maybe the conclusions or the information has changed in the meantime. But
I will absolutely ensure that the consultant has direct connection with our writer to ensure that all of the facts are accurate in terms of what they have, and that every question is answered as completely as possible. And I've got Roy Soon in my back pocket hanging out, just waiting for me to ask him a million questions, and he will go scatter to the winds to all the different consultants and make sure we get the exact right answer.
can't ask for anything more than that.
I have a question about outreach and how we can increase the survey responses. So we had 2, so good start, right? But how do we build on that? So I was wanting to know how did outreach happen for this? I know I saw one post that SCV Water posted about it, but that was the only one I saw. Was there any more outreach done on behalf of the agency prior to the public workshop?
Yes, I'm going to actually let Kathy speak to that, because we actually leveraged SCV Water ad buys to, and it may be the reason why there were 68 participants, even if there were only 2 people who then filled out the form. So Kathy, can you, hey, there she is.
I'm here. Can you all hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. My other headphones died halfway through this meeting, so I wasn't sure how these work. We got a later start than we would like, and we've got plans already to kick off the next workshop a lot sooner, but we did do 2 print ads in the Signal. We did social media. We did our Facebook and Instagram and Twitter. We had the Signal boost our posts through their Facebook. I haven't looked at the analytics. We can do that, though. I can figure out how many impressions we got through all of that. And then we also did an email, an e-blast that went not just to the GSA list, but it went to our entire customer list. And for customers with emails, that's about 20,000. So we did get it out there.
Thank you. So I'm wondering if we could, at the beginning of the next public workshop, preview for the participants, for the public, that I know you talked about it at the end of the public workshop, but maybe, I don't know if people dropped off during the call, or if it just put it more in the forefront of their minds that part of the receiving information from them to incorporate into the plan is that we need that input. And maybe if they're not putting it into the chat, that there's another place for us to capture that, and that's the survey. So maybe preview that at the beginning of the presentation and say, this is a survey we have. Actually show them the questions so that they can understand what the format's going to be. So that when it's over and it's time to do that, hopefully they then follow through and actually complete the survey then. And then
can I actually address that? One thing that Kathy and I have already been discussing, and I think you guys are going to love it, is that we're going to create an interactive component with the website that's a quick poll at the beginning of the next presentation, so that there's an interactive piece that they can, and we'll see the poll information live. You'll see it on my screen. I'll be screen sharing at that point in time, so that we do get people to the website, even if, I mean, they can't make people fill out a survey, unfortunately, but they will be at least in that moment on the website and seeing things earlier.
Okay.
There.
That sounds good. And then also letting everybody know how long the survey will be open, because I don't think we announced that last time. So people don't know, if you don't do it that day, does it close automatically, or do they have a period of time to go back and do that? And then I know we recorded the session. So is there a way to do a little bit of outreach afterwards to say, hey, in case you missed it, you weren't able to be part of this live, here's the recording that you can watch at on your own time, and then please fill out the survey also. I think maybe that could get more people to participate in the surveys and provide written input.
Absolutely, and we will be doing that, for sure.
Thanks.
It was only just posted today. It takes a long time for those things to get processed, actually. Anyway, enough about my technical issues.
Okay.
Any other questions or feedback? Thank you very much, Kathy. All right, great. And back to you, Holly, to close
And
the meeting.
I'm gonna just check quick, any public comments on this topic, on this, on the feedback on the workshop?
Everyone's been unmuted. I see no hands raised.
Okay, great. Then the last item on the agenda is any requests for future agenda items for our next meeting. And I think, Eric, we were talking maybe about, or Roger, so it was Roger who was asking that we're going to sort of broaden that one that's on the agenda for July, correct?
That's correct. And I have a couple of specific questions and then just give a little background just for a minute. Dan, what is the cost if you want to purchase 1 acre-foot of untreated water, if SCV Water wants to purchase that?
Oh, gosh. You mean
Roughly.
from like the lake?
I think that might be a better question for Steve. Steve,
Right.
could you address that question?
If Steve is on, that's fine.
Actually, maybe, I don't want to put him on the spot, but maybe Dirk.
Well,
Steve's not with us today.
Oh yeah, Dirk. Dirk
Who's
would
Dirk?
know.
Let me just, I kind of know the answer to the question, but I wasn't sure. I've been told by somebody who is in a position to know, but I also look on the LADWP and they purchase water, wholesale untreated water, at least in 2018, for around $600 to $700 an acre foot. Does that sound reasonable to you, Dan? Or
Water and Power has different sources. You know, the agency, Dirk can address it, but it's state project water. He can tell you what that is.
Yeah.
We don't deliver it untreated, or the agency doesn't deliver it untreated.
No, I know, but you purchase, their Department of Water and Power, for instance, purchases untreated water, and then they treat it and they retail it.
There's a fixed component and a variable component, but once again, I'll let Dirk address that.
Okay. Well, this information I have is
It may mean that it's not.
Dirk is waiting to answer your
analogous
question.
cases.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, we're trying to.
Dirk is waiting right there to answer your question.
Okay.
Go, Dirk.
Okay, if you're going to go out on the market and buy water in addition to our state water project supplies, it could, in a wet year, be a couple $100 an acre foot. In a dry year, it can exceed $600 or $700 an acre foot. Plus, you pay another $200 an acre foot to pay energy costs to get it to our surface area.
Okay, so the range is from a couple $100 an acre foot to maybe $600 or $700 an acre foot, depending on whether it's a dry year or wet year. And the reason I asked the question, because it pertains to the presentation, if we can get it on the agenda, as to what the implication of the restricted flow from Bouquet Reservoir has on the not just on the water that enters the aquifer, and you know, the amount of water we're talking about compared to 1.56 million or 6 million acre feet in the aquifer is a very small amount. But if you convert an acre foot of water to money for untreated water as a purchase, it becomes a very significant amount of dollars. And the application is to divert and store water that otherwise would be going into the aquifer. And my position would be, why do we give them permission? Why don't we just sell them the water? So that's just a background for my presentation. And that, by the way, if you take 1,830 acre feet of water and you multiply it by $600 per acre foot in a dry year, which until last year we had 7 dry years, that's a substantial amount of water on an annual basis. And if you take the amount of water that they've already diverted and stored without permit since 2005, that's an even greater amount. So Jeff, last meeting I asked you if you could get me the amount of water that Department of Water and Power has already diverted since 2005. You said you could, and maybe Tara has my email. Maybe you can email me that once you find out that.
I have a very quick question. Maybe Roger, you would know this.
Sure.
The amount of water from the Bouquet Reservoir is about 25% of what was promised. Oh gosh, over the last 12 or 14 years. So the question is, there has been work being done at Bouquet, which I'm sure you're aware of. When is the completion expected, and will the full amount of water again be allowed to flow down from Bouquet Reservoir? And that's
Well, go ahead. I'm sorry.
for our aquifer.
You know, what they're asking for is to divert 1,800 acre feet of water per year. The stream bed, it's difficult to get too much more than 2,100 acre feet a year. Maybe you can bump it up to 2,500 acre feet, but and I don't know, I'm not an expert in that. But what I do know is from 2005 till now, there's a substantial amount of water that is being stored, and they're never going to be able to release that down the stream. So my question is, why don't we just sell it to them at the wholesale price of untreated water? That gets into the millions of dollars.
And with that, we will continue this at the agenda item next time we talk.
Perfect. Thank you. Jeff, could you, any chance of you getting me that amount of acre feet that's already stored, diverted and stored in Bouquet Reservoir since 2005?
Yes, I've already pulled it together, and
if you can shoot it to me by email, I'd appreciate it.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so Tara, you've got that for a future agenda item, kind of an elaboration on the previous. And are there any other future agenda items people want to bring up?
Yes, I would like us to explore the issue of encroachment on the river and the stream beds, and and also the fact that we have land that's developed and how it's affected the recharge rate in the Santa Clarita watershed. I think that's really important for us to look at. And we should be looking at ways to keep rivers flowing and not being channeled, obviously, so that we have recharge, and to not speed up the flow of the rivers, because that exacerbates the lack of recharge.
Tara, is there, as we go through the workshops to building the plan, is there a place where that fits?
Very specifically, there is a surface water, groundwater interconnection piece where I think that piece really matters and makes sense. Jeff, is there a better place for that? You're there? I see you there.
Actually, that sounds like a good place to me.
Yeah, I'm here. That is a topic that we could explore in that part of the project. Yeah.
Okay, so I don't know when that is on the schedule, but I thought I remembered there being a piece there. So let's make sure that it sounds like it'll be there, but keep that in mind that Sandra put that forward when we get to that place. Or maybe you can, let Sandra know or me know when that is on the calendar as you look at the overall calendar again.
Yes, and it is a conversation that Sandra and I have had before. Sandra, I don't know if you remember, but I did say that would be included in that at that point in time, and will 100% be included.
Great.
I have that in my notes and record in addition to this conversation.
Great. Any other items for future agenda? All right, great. Well, with that, we are adjourned. Thank you, everybody, for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.